Hey everyone, Crow back again, and I recently finished playing all the games in the Sunsoft Collection one for the Evercade. Like all Evercade carts, this one comes in a clamshell case with a full color manual, and like most of the other collections, there's no bonus items included in this one. The collection includes 6 games, and I played them all in the order they were originally released in, starting with Arabian, and that was originally released in 1983. But that's the arcade version that was released in 1983. The Evercade manual and menu in the UI actually say 1983, but what's included here is the Famicom version, and that was released in 1985, so I don't know why they were putting 1983 everywhere. And also, the Famicom release was called Super Arabian, but for whatever reason, Blaze took out the Super. They literally erased Super from the title. I don't really know what the purpose they had in doing that. But let's move on. The second game I played was Blaster Master, and this was really released in 1988 in North America and Japan. It was released in 1991 in Europe. It was only released for the NES, and this is probably the most well-known game in the collection. And then the next one I played after that was Journey to Silius. That was originally released in 1990 on the NES. And, you know, this was the game I was actually looking forward to playing the most, and that's primarily because I played it a lot when I was a kid. Next after that was Blaster Master Boy. It was originally released in 1991 for the Game Boy. And this game's actually a total lie. This is not a Blaster Master game at all. I'll talk more about that a little bit later on. Next was Mr. Gimmick. This was released in 1992 in Japan. 1993 in Europe, and it was never released in North America, which is why I probably was super unfamiliar with this game. And it was actually a really late NES release. And then finally, actually the last game I played was Aero the Acro-Bat. This was released in 1993 in North America and Europe, and it actually had no Japanese release. I knew about this game for a long time, kept seeing advertisements and everything, and to me it was just a mascot platformer, and those were a dime a dozen back in those days. So I played all these games on the Evercade VS with my Mayflash F500 arcade stick, and I'm just saying this so you know how I played the games. I didn't play it on the EXP or anything. And as usual, I'm going to talk about these games in the order of how much I liked them. Starting with my least favorite, and that's going to be Blaster Master Boy. So like I said, this isn't actually a Blaster Master game. In fact, in Japan, the name of this game is Bomber King Scenario 2, and it's the sequel to a game called Bomber King, which was a Famicom game that was made by Hudson, and it's a Bomberman spin-off game. We did get this game in North America, except here it was called Robo Warrior. So, this should have been called Robo Warrior Boy, I guess. And I could tell you what the story is, but all it really does is shoehorn the character from Blaster Master into this game, into a sort of, kind of doesn't even make sense to me. So yeah, like I said, this isn't really a Blaster Master game. This plays more like a Bomberman game. You do lay down bombs to destroy breakable objects and kill monsters, and when you destroy the objects you can unveil new items and power-ups and such. But the difference here is that you actually get 4 different kinds of bombs. You have your standard bomb, which does have your small explosion radius. You have a directional bomb, which will only fire a blast in one direction. You can get a hyper bomb that'll shoot out blasts in 4 separate directions pretty far, and then a super bomb, which just basically does a huge big explosion. You can also pick up some consumable items, including a lantern that'll help you see in the dark, a life preserver that'll help you float in water so you don't drown, and power boots so you can walk onto spikes. Now there are 9 levels in this game, but each level has a different number of stages, and in each stage you need to find a key so you can unveil the exit so you can move on to the next stage. And then the last stage in every level is always a boss fight. Some of those are fun, some of those are really annoying, and some of them will just confuse and irritate the hell out of you, like this one. Now, even though this is not a Blaster Master game, I thought I'd still enjoy this game because I like the Bomberman games. But almost immediately after I started playing it, I started getting bored having to go and hunt down all the keys in the levels just to unlock the exits so I can leave and go to the next level. And that's really not different than what you would do in a regular Bomberman game, but the difference here is that your power-ups aren't like they are in Bomberman. You can't expand your flames or anything. Your standard bomb just stays the same in the whole game. But here instead you get the consumable bombs that do different things. But when you start the game, you don't really get any. And then when you start collecting them, you don't really want to use them. But the thing that really kills this game for me are the lanterns. They only last for like 10 seconds each. The thing was, I thought the lanterns were kind of optional in the beginning, because what would happen is you'd blow up some stuff, you'd uncover steps that go into a cave, and all the caves would be dark. So you would need the lanterns to walk around the cave. Now the cave can contain items that you would want to collect, you know, but there are also monsters down there too, so you absolutely do need your lanterns so you're not always taking damage down in those caves. So I was like, okay, well I have lanterns, I'll go into this cave and I'd use up my lanterns and everything. Not thinking that, okay, the lanterns would only be for finding these bonus items and stuff. But no, later on in the game, the main levels become dark and you need lanterns to make them through. And what wound up happening to me is that I made it to the stage right before the final boss of the game, and sure enough, they happen to be pitch black, and I have absolutely no lanterns on me. Now, if I was playing this on original hardware, there would be no way I would survive enough to actually fumble my way through the level. The only way I was actually able to make it through that level in the pitch black with spikes and everything, it was through a combination of a lot of save states and looking up a YouTube video to watch somebody else play through the level and trying to mimic their steps. And even then, I think it took me well over an hour, maybe even 2 hours, just to get through that one level without any lanterns. I was already not really liking the game to begin with, but that just pushed me over the edge, and I had to give this a 2 out of 10. But that all being said, let's move on to a game I like slightly more than Blaster Master Boy, or should I say Bomber King Scenario 2. And that's going to be Arabian. And this is a single screen platformer. You have the ability to jump and kick. Those are your two actions in the game. The kind of neat thing about this game is when you can kick an enemy and it'll fly horizontally across the screen. And if it comes into contact with another enemy, that it'll just take it with it and fly it off the screen. Sometimes you'll even get an item flying across the screen when you do that. It'll give you temporary invincibility. Now your main goal in all of these stages is to collect all the vases you see on the screen. And each vase has a letter on it, and there's a word at the top of the screen. And if you collect the vases in the order, spell the word out, you get bonus points at the end. But basically all you got to do is collect all the vases, and bam, level's over, you move on to the next one. But there's only 4 stages in the game, the first stage being a ship. The second one is kind of like these underground caverns. The third one, I think it's supposed to be like the outside of a castle wall or something. And the fourth one is, I don't really know, it's just a tomb or something. I don't really know what this is. But after you complete that stage, you move on to the next level, and the first stage in level 2 is the ship again. And you just kind of repeat those 4 stages again and again and again and again, all the way up through level 8. And what winds up happening is the game gets a little bit more difficult, but the main thing that changes is collecting the vases. The vases are all in the same position, but you will start to not know what letters in which vase. They'll have question marks on them, and you'll have to do something to trigger to be able to see what those letters are so you know which order to collect them in if you want that bonus. But even if you ignore all that, once you get to the final levels in the game, you'll be forced to collect the vases in the correct order. Now, when I first started playing the game, I was thinking, hey, this could be an okay game. I could kind of see where this is going. But then once I got to the second stage, something just kind of seemed off. And mainly that would be the ladders, because sometimes I would be right under a ladder and pushing up, and the guy wouldn't climb the ladder until I went a little off center of the ladder. Then he was fine going up. So that was my first hint something was kind of weird with this game. And then the third stage, you got these magic carpets flying around. It all just looks like a big jumbled mess to begin with. But you got these flying carpets flying around, and they're incredibly difficult to jump onto for some reason. And not only that, but once you jump on it, you have to be duck in order not to get pushed off from the flying carpet right above it. And then once you get to the third one and you try to jump on the platform, then that becomes difficult. It doesn't behave like you would think it would. So you wind up working all that out. The fourth stage is more flying carpets and stuff. But then the more you play the game, the more you realize that when you jump and kick in the air, it's kind of broken, because you'll jump in the air and kick, and when you kick, you're kind of frozen in place, giving you more hang time. So with the Evercade, with the NES games, or Famicom games even, you get auto-fire automatically onto the buttons. And things become real interesting when you hold down that auto fire button when you're kicking, because then you could just kind of hang in the air like a really long time, which kind of is helpful if you jump in the air waiting for a magic carpet and you just hold that button down, kind of hover until you can finally land on it. But playing it even more, I found something a little bit more broken, and that would be if you do that, if you push that auto fire button on that kick, as you're jumping up right away, you almost seem to jump up a little bit higher than you should be able to. And yeah, this just ultimately feels like a really janky third-party early release for the NES/Famicom, and it just doesn't really feel that great to play. So ultimately, I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 10. But that's actually going to be the last game in this collection that I didn't like, because the other 4 of them I did like to a certain extent. So my next favorite game, I guess, in this collection is Aero the Acro-Bat. And all I really knew about this game is that it was a mascot platformer. I mean, I knew about it, I just never really seen it or played it. It just showed up in magazines all the time, and I was like, yeah, it's another mascot platformer, whatever. But the plot of this one, and you kind of have to read the manual to know the plot, doesn't really bother to tell you in the game itself. An ex-clown sabotages the circus/amusement park, and Aero is there to stop them. That's pretty much the whole plot of the game. So in terms of gameplay, what we got is a jump and drill attack. So if you jump, you'll just jump normally, and if you hit the jump button again, you'll either drill attack up diagonally or down diagonally. It's a little bit goofy. Sometimes you'll want to drill up and you swear you're pushing up, but you'll go down anyway. So there's something a little goofy going on there. The other things you got are throwing stars, but you don't really start with any. You have to collect them throughout the stage, and as you throw them, they're gone. So I kind of forgot all about that at some point. I really rarely use those. The other thing you could do is you could hit a button to hover in place for a second, which I didn't really find useful at all. It's not like you can fly around while you're hovering. No. If you're falling and you're like, oh no, hover, and you hover and you see you're going to land on some spikes, there's really nothing you can do. There's only 4 levels to this game, but each level contains a ton of stages, so it's not like this is a short game or anything. It just takes quite a while to see a change of scenery. The thing that's a little bit unique, though, is that each act or stage in each level has a different goal that needs to be completed before you can finish it. Now, this usually boils down to finding X amount of items that you need to find before the exit will actually appear for you so you can leave. But there's many levels where you can just, as long as you can get to the end of the level, you're good to go. Now, I really wasn't looking forward to playing this one at all, and the game to me doesn't really start off on the right foot. I mean, the first several stages of the game I found extremely annoying. It's always like, find all the star platforms, find all the hoops, find all the lights to turn the lights on. And the problem is that these are huge, big, open areas. It's not really linear, so you're forced to explore all these areas while going through. And then eventually, you'll just hit a dead end. And you're like, oh, the exit's supposed to be here, but I didn't find all the items. So now you gotta go backtrack through the whole rest of the level, trying to find what you missed, and that's never fun. And not only that, but you have a timer counting down the whole time too. So you're like, oh man, do I have time enough to run back through the level, find what I missed, and then make it back to this point so I can leave the level? And it just seemed to be that over and over and over and over again. I spent like 3 days playing this game, and at the end of the first game, I was convinced I was going to give this game like a 4 out of 10. But then, after you get past the circus, then it becomes, for whatever reason, way more straightforward. Yeah, you could still explore, there's still hidden areas to find, but you're not going to get lost searching for things. In fact, most of the levels are just really straightforward from that point on, although it is kind of annoying. When you do run really fast, Aero will have a tendency to gravitate more towards the either left or right of the screen as he's running, giving you less of an opportunity to see what's coming up. So they kind of screwed that up a little bit. But like I said, after that whole circus area, you're doing a whole lot of cool things. You're riding a roller coaster, which is really kind of like a minecart level, and I kind of like those kind of levels. You're riding a thing that they call a rotor, flipping it up or down to avoid all the barriers. Then there's surviving a barrel roll, there's bungee jumping, there's navigating a log flume. He's doing a whole lot of cool stuff. You just have to make it past that first level. And the final boss, well, it's like they took the boss battle and combined it with a whole level, because you have to fight the boss, navigate the level to the next section, all while being attacked by the boss. You just keep progressing higher and higher and higher, and the final payoff is actually well worth it. I really like the way this game ended. Now, as a whole, the game, I guess, isn't that hard, but it does tend to get difficult at certain points throughout the game. At the end of the day, I spent like maybe 6 hours playing this game. And after that first day where I went from not really liking it and giving it a 4 out of 10, once I got past that first level, I played through the rest of the game. I actually kind of liked it, and I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. Alright, next up is Mr. Gimmick, and not only is it the hardest game in this collection, but it's probably the hardest game on the Evercade, period. But first, the plot. And the plot is kind of like in a more evil Toy Story. Basically, this little girl gets a doll for her birthday. It happens to be Mr. Gimmick. And at night, while she's sleeping, all her other toys are jealous of the attention Mr. Gimmick has been getting. So they kidnap the little girl and take her to another dimension. And Mr. Gimmick, of course, I guess, follows them and goes out to rescue the girl. Now, the game is on the NES, so the controls are pretty simplistic. Basically, you have one button for jumping and another one for your star attack. But the way the star attack works, it's not like you can just hammer that button and throw stars. No, you hold the button down to charge up a star, and you'll hold it over your head as long as you're holding the button down. And then when you let go of the button, he'll throw the star, and it'll bounce around. And depending on whether you're standing or jumping, it depends on how the star bounces. And that star will take out most enemies and damage most others, but the caveat is, as long as there's a star on the screen, you cannot charge up another star. So if you throw a star and it kind of misses everything and it's bouncing around, you're kind of defenseless until that star just decides to disappear. But one of the things that makes this game so difficult is the character's inertia while you're running around the screen. And not only that, but there's a lot of times where you'll need to ride the star, especially if you're going to go for the true ending. And the thing moves super fast, and really the only reliable way to ride the star is to throw it up against a wall and get on it when it's bouncing its way back. And also, when you jump on most enemies, you can ride them as well. It's kind of like a Super Mario Bros. 2 kind of thing, except you can't pick them up. Now, there are other items you could throw. You could pick up potions and bombs, and you could push, I guess, down on the D-pad to cycle through them, and push up and the attack button to use those items that you have highlighted. But the whole riding the star thing, and getting used to all the mechanics of throwing and riding and everything, you're gonna need that if you're gonna get the true ending to the game. There are actually 7 levels to this game, and in the first 6 levels there's a special hidden item you'll need to find, and you'll need to find all 6 of them in order to gain access to the 7th level. So if you go through all 6 levels and you haven't found every single special item, you'll get the bad ending right then and there. Only when you collect all 6 of them. Some of them are really ridiculous to get. And you have to get all 6 of them before you get access to the 7th level, and then fight the final boss of the game and get the true ending. Now, I didn't really know anything about this game before I played it here on the Evercade, and that's primarily because it was never released in North America, only in Japan and in Europe. And so I did a little bit of research like I usually do before I started playing the game, and I read, oh, you can throw the star and ride it, okay. And then when I started playing the game and I threw the star, I was like, wait a minute, how the hell am I supposed to catch up to that thing and ride it? No, you can't just throw it and jump on it and ride it like I thought you'd be able to do. Now you gotta turn around and throw it against the wall and hope you can jump on it. And like I said, a lot of these special areas not only require you to know where the special item is, but you have to know the method in which to gain access to those areas and also be able to execute them. But another thing that makes this game so difficult are the boss battles, because not only do they have patterns like most other bosses in other games have, but they will react to your actions. So they'll be following their own pattern, they'll be doing their own thing, and then the second you go to hit them with a star, they're going to jump and dodge out of the way. They're going to block it. You kind of have to trick them in order to hit them. Either that, or the level is going to be designed in a way where it's going to be very hard for you to throw the star in a way that you're going to be able to hit whatever you need to hit. And not only that, but the screen does scroll, but from time to time you'll transition into another screen completely, and you could just get attacked the second you pop onto that screen. And if you weren't ready for it, you're going to take a hit. So yeah, the game was completely designed to be that difficult. It's not difficult due to any technical issues or anything, but it is a really good game. Really, really big challenge, even with save states to get through this game. And I really did like it, so I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. And my second favorite game in this collection is Blaster Master. And I know this was a game a lot of people were looking forward to. It was really popular even back in the day in the late 80s when this originally came out. This was known as Meta Fight in Japan, and for some reason I'd never played this one before. I guess I just never knew anybody that had this game. When I started watching YouTube, there were a lot of videos on it. I saw so much information on it, I feel like I still knew the game, but I guess here was my opportunity to play it for the first time. So boot up the game and you start to see this cutscene, and your character's name is Jason. Basically his frog escapes from his house and immediately runs into a radioactive crate, becomes radioactive, and instead of dying slowly of radiation poisoning, he grows to a completely immense size and then jumps into a deep crater that happens to be right beside the radioactive crate. So it's like, this already, things don't make sense. It's like, why is there a radioactive crate right next to this guy's house, right next to a deep chasm? So your character Jason sees the frog starting to get big and jump into the hole, so he does what any sane person would do at that point: jump into the hole after the frog. The first thing he sees is an armored vehicle that's sitting right there. Where did this vehicle come from? Who does it belong to? I guess it doesn't matter, because Jason actually also finds an outfit for driving this vehicle that happens to fit him perfectly, helmet and all. And he just jumps in and drives away. Basically, that's the start of the game. I know there's some games out there with really weird intros, but this one's really up there. There's two different modes to this game. There's the overworld mode and the indoors mode, I'll call it. In the overworld mode, you're driving around your armored tank, you can jump, you can shoot missiles, you have special missiles. You've got homing missiles, you've got thunder break, which is kind of like this lightning attack, and multi-warhead missiles, but to be honest, all I really used throughout the game were homing missiles. When I needed to take out enemies that weren't in my line of fire or anything, I just used the homing missiles. And then when you beat each of the game's bosses, you'll get a new ability for your vehicle that allow you to gain access to areas you previously didn't have access to. Now also, while you're driving around in your vehicle, you can hit the select button and Jason will just pop out of the vehicle and he can run around his own and actually get into areas the vehicle cannot. Jason can also get into these doors, I guess, and then you wind up in these indoor areas. And a lot of these caves are just really there to give you weapons and upgrade your stuff and maybe give you health and everything. But occasionally you'll run into these caves and you'll run into one of the boss characters. And then, as I previously stated, you beat that boss character and you'll get an upgrade for your vehicle. So you can go back to your vehicle and explore more and find that certain area that you can now gain access to. If you play without a guide, a lot of the time you'll spend playing this game is just finding out where you need to go next. I did kind of use a guide in order to play all the way through the game. And the thing is, you don't even really need to look up a guide. The Evercade manual provides kind of like an overall map, kind of giving you hints as to where you need to go, and also kind of maps for each, so not all of the areas, but a lot of them. But I found those maps to be kind of useless because I could not understand like what they were trying to say or where I was gonna go. A lot of these rooms kind of seem sectioned off by themselves and they don't show which ones connect to what. and I'm pretty sure the maps kind of like overlap each other and wrap around, although it's not very clear. And I was also thinking, like, man, it's very nice of Blaze to include these maps in the manual. And then when I looked up the original Blaster Master map, I found, I see, this is where they got the maps from. They didn't make these, they just pulled them right from the original game's manual. But regardless, the game is really good, and the music is excellent, but it's not without its flaws. The most annoying thing in the game is the slowdown. Whenever there's too many sprites on the screen, and that can happen pretty frequently, the game slows down to a crawl. And the thing I found really weird is that the enemy sprites need to be completely on the screen. Otherwise, the game acts like they don't exist at all. They'll kind of put them in a limbo status. And then when you move the screen to where the position they were in it comes back on the screen, as long as that sprite can be shown fully on the screen again, it'll reappear. It just seems like they're kind of reappearing and disappearing out of nowhere. And this is kind of annoying for a couple reasons. Firstly, if you're shooting at something and it winds up going off the screen as you're shooting it, the game just acts like it doesn't exist anymore. You're not hitting it off screen, it's just not there anymore. And also when you're doing like platforming upward, for some reason a lot of platforms are spaced out in just the right way, where if there's something sitting on the platform above, it's just partially off screen. As soon as you jump up to it, you're like, holy crap, there was something there and it just wasn't showing me. And the other thing that's kind of slightly frustrating is it has to do with the controls of your vehicle when you're getting it upgraded. You could get this diving ability, and underwater you're able to move it up and down, but the problem is that pushing down and the fire button will shoot off your special attacks, and those are consumables. You'll use them up. And if you're shooting at something and you want to go lower and you push down and you're shooting, all of a sudden you start firing off special attacks. Oh wait, no, I didn't want to do that. That's slightly frustrating. And the other one is when you get the ability to climb up walls and ceilings, it kind of makes it harder to jump gaps, because the whole game you're getting used to kind of going halfway off the ledge before you jump. But when you get the ability to cling to walls and ceilings, instead of going halfway off, you wind up clinging to the wall instead, and that could just leave you jumping into positions you don't want to be in, like falling into lava and stuff. So yeah, that's slightly annoying. Again, these are just slight annoyances. This is still a fantastic game regardless, and I am giving it 9 out of 10. Alright, so my number one game of this collection is what I thought it was going to be, and that's Journey to Silius. Again, this was a game I had when I was a kid, but it's been decades since I played it. So I was thinking, it's like, is this game going to hold up to what I had in my mind? And, spoilers, yeah, it did. But one thing that I wanted to talk about was the Japanese title of this game. Because if you go to a website like Moby Games or GameFAQs, they're going to list the Japanese name of the game as RAF World, R-A-F. And that's not right, but I can understand why they put RAF World. If you look at the title screen or the box art of the Japanese version, you'll see what looks like RAF. The problem is that that middle character there that's between the R and the F is not an A. It's a phonetic symbol that looks like an upside down V. And it's supposed to be pronounced like you would pronounce the vowel in the words love or cut. So that's supposed to say rough. It's supposed to be Rough World. And also, if you look at the Japanese symbols right below it, that's katakana for ra and fu. Rafu. Rafu World. Rough World makes more sense than RAF World. Alright, anyway, the story to Journey to Silius is kind of nonsense, and it doesn't really matter all that much at all. Your character's name is Jay. His father is a scientist working on space colony development and is killed by terrorists in the Silius solar system because they don't like that for some reason. It's not really explained why. But you find his plans and then journey to Silius to complete his work and then take on the terrorists as well. But what's even more interesting is the origin story of the game. You see, this was originally supposed to be a Terminator game, and for whatever reason the rights to that fell through, so they just kind of changed some of the graphics around and came up with the other story and called it Journey Silius. In fact, I guess in Japan it's called Rough World, and it's got a completely different story. I guess you just make up the story however you want to fit the game you already made. But after knowing this, when you're playing the game, everything just looks like a Terminator to you from that point on. Even the final boss, I remember when I was playing against the final boss as a kid, I was like, wow, that looks just like a Terminator. And that's because it originally was intended to be. So the game is what I'd call a run and gunner, kind of like Mega Man. It actually reminds me a lot of Mega Man in a way. All your weapons except for your main gun uses energy. Except in Journey to Silius, you get your new weapons after you beat the sub-boss of the level right before you fight the final boss of the level. Also, the game is very linear. There are no stage selections. You could play through the game with the standard weapon just fine. The extra weapons are there just to make some of the game a little bit easier for yourself. Other than that, the game is just pretty straightforward. So, the one thing I always remembered about this game was how good the music was. The soundtrack is just so good. And the soundtrack in Blaster Master is great as well, but to me, Journey Silius' soundtrack is way above Blaster Master. On top of that, the gameplay is really solid, and it doesn't have the same technical issues that Blaster Master has. You're not going to get slowdown or a whole bunch of flickering sprites or control issues or anything like that, but the game is not perfect. To me, it's very close to a 10 out of 10, but I just can't give it a 10 out of 10. And that's primarily because I don't think it's possible to make it through this game without taking damage. There are a bunch of blind jumps in the game where you're gonna take damage if you don't know exactly how to position yourself when you land. And I'm almost 100% convinced that there are certain situations where you're gonna get hit no matter what you do. And if you can't make it through a game without taking any sort of damage at all, I don't think it can be considered perfect. So I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. So that's all 6 games in Sunsoft Collection 1. The only question left to answer is, where do I rank this against all the other Evercade carts I've looked at so far? Well, I gave 2 games in this collection a 9 out of 10, and that puts it in B+ territory, but it's going to be at the bottom of the B+ list. I didn't give any games a rating of 8. And next highest was 7. I gave 2 games a 7. All the other games in the B+ tier have, at least one other game that I gave an 8. They have 2 9s and at least one other 8. So that puts Sunsoft Collection 1 at the bottom of that tier. The next collection I look at is going to be Delphine Collection 1. It's got 4 games in it. I would say they're all Amiga games, but actually one of these isn't. It's got 2 point-and-click adventure games, Future Wars and Operation Stealth. And then there's Another World, which in North America was called Out of This World, and I remember playing that on DOS way back in the day, so it'll be interesting to see the Amiga version of that. The last game here is Flashback, and even though there was an Amiga version of Flashback, this is kind of the cheat. This is the Sega Genesis version that's on here, and the reason I claim they put the Genesis version on here is because it plays better than the Amiga version, but I don't know, to me it just seems like they should have stuck the Amiga version in there anyway, regardless. Wouldn't be the only time they put the inferior version of a game on a cart. I don't know why they just didn't do it here and just say this is all Amiga. In fact, it says Amiga on the front of the box, so that's kind of a lie right there. In fact, this was the whole thing we discussed on the Evercast. Anyway, that'll be it. See you all next time. Bye.